Okay, so I'm going to show you guys how to use your plaster gauze. It is pretty straightforward, but you will need a little cup of water, your plaster strips. You'll need to be at a table that's got some orange paper on it. I have one set up already, but obviously we could set up more if we need more. And then you're going to just work on wrapping your sculpture. Now, obviously this one's already started, and I did fix the legs after I broke them last week. So I don't have to wrap that part. But I am going to show you kind of the basic how-to. You do want to think about wrapping your whole sculpture and then going back and adding a second and maybe even a third layer to different parts. The areas where you have your pipe cleaner and your tinfoil connecting parts and pieces, you know, like the legs and things like that, you're going to need to spend a significant time on to make sure that you get a good wrap so that the sculpture is going to stay in place and stand how you want it to. So keep that in mind too. So you guys, really, all I'm going to do is I'm going to take this plaster gauze. I'm going to dip it in the water. I usually let some of the water drip back off so that it's not super sloppy. And then I'm just going to take it and start wrapping. And my goal as I go is to keep it as flat as possible. I don't want it to kind of bulge or bunch up if I can avoid it. And then I'm going to smooth it out with my fingers. Okay, as you look at the plaster, right, there's little holes in it. But when you put that plaster on your sculpture, you want to smooth out those spots so that they don't have those holes anymore. Okay, and you can always dip your finger a little bit more in water if you need to. Okay, and kind of do that. If you have areas that you leave edges or things like that stuck up, I just kind of got rid of one right here. They're going to harden like that and stay like that. So you do want to be sure that you're really kind of thinking about how you're wrapping your sculpture and making sure that you're checking all your loose ends so that you don't end up with pieces like that. You can also cut these smaller. Okay, we've cut them down into inch strips so that they're easier to work with. But if you're working on a really tight or a really little space, you might decide that you want your strip to be even smaller or you want it to be a little bit shorter. You are absolutely welcome to do that. Okay, you don't need to keep them this size just because this is what we originally cut them as. Okay, you can definitely cut them down smaller or things like that. Do try and use the same scissors that we used before so that, you know, at the end when I clean them, they'll all still just be those that I need to clean. And then once you get to this point, like, okay, I've wrapped everything, now I just have some extra pieces I'm going to go over it with. I'm going to look for those areas that are maybe thinner. Right, like this back leg is a little bit thinner than the other back leg, or she kind of has this little spot here that's a little concave. So I might fold a little section to kind of stuff in there and then put another piece there. So now I'm kind of just perfecting the spaces that are there. So wrap it first, then go back with your extra pieces to kind of perfect your spots. Then when you're done, when we put them on the shelves, right, we put them over on the shelf, it's still going to go to the same shelves, but do make sure that you're setting your sculpture on the orange paper on the shelf instead of just the bare shelf, so that if they do drip a little bit, it's all in one little spot, and we can clean it up by just taking that paper. Okay, that's kind of it. The other thing I want to mention just real quick too, guys, is look where my pipe cleaners have connected to each other. Okay, the front leg, the back legs, these are all spaces where I did not just wrap this leg and just wrap up here. I made sure that I had pieces that crossed both. This is what's going to keep your sculpture together. So be sure that when you're wrapping, that you're thinking about wrapping across those spaces. So you might have to wrap down and around and under and then down. You know, you're going to have to kind of go with the flow how the plaster strip wants to wrap, but you need to be sure that you're thinking about wrapping across those spaces to get a good joint.